Welcome back, focused learners. Today on The Explainer, we are taking a massive deep dive into the meticulously crafted, completely dystopian sci-fi world of the Eternal Vigil. We're going to unpack the narrative architecture, the rich thematic metaphors, and the profound social commentary embedded in this incredible story. So grab your mental notepads, because we are about to unpack an entire society literally trapped inside a giant metal cylinder.
So let's crack the code on this one. What happens when humanity's survival depends on a 200-year-old lie? The Eternal Vigil is a generation ship that's been cruising through the freezing void of space for 247 years. Just think about that. Nobody currently alive has ever seen a real planet or felt actual sunlight. And that central mystery, what happens when everything is built on a 2-century-old lie, that's what drives the incredibly high stakes of this whole story. And spoiler alert, it's all rooted in a system of absolute suffocating control.
Now, the foundational mechanism of this oppression is something called the Purity Index. And listen, this isn't just some casual guideline, it is the absolute law of the ship. Your entire social standing, it's completely dictated by how closely your DNA matches the archived profiles of the original founders. If you've got a 98% match or higher, you're set. You get silver piping on your uniform, double rations of real fruit, and you basically get to make the laws up in the upper decks. But what if your match falls below 60%? Well, you are immediately forced into hard, manual labor, spending your entire life scrubbing out the ship's recyclers. It is a completely merciless, assigned existence from day one.
Which brings us to Section 1, Humanity's Genetic Caste System.
Okay, so looking back at the ship's history really shows us how this rigid society formed in the first place. Back in year 47, there was a violent command mutiny that absolutely nearly tore the ship apart. This resulted in the supposed death of the original founder, Commander Harlan J. Voss. Then, fast forward to year 112, the ship got hit by the Great Blight. This was a devastating event that permanently sealed off huge agricultural sections of the ship. And that brings us to year 247, current day, where the ship is finally approaching its destination system. Generation after generation just trapped in this metal cage, governed by a totally inflexible caste system forged in the trauma of that mutiny way back in year 47.
And the stark irony between these two groups is just wild. The upper decks, the pure ruling class, they are actually biologically failing. Their obsession with keeping the founder bloodlines completely pure has led to dangerous inbreeding and all sorts of recessive defects. Meanwhile, the lower decks, the folks categorized as impure and forced into manual labor, they are actually way healthier physically, all thanks to spontaneous genetic mixing. And the kicker? The ruling council totally knows this, but they refuse to change course because clinging to their political power is just way more important to them than the actual biological survival of the crew.
But here is the absolute crucial point, the ticking clock. The ship is exactly 18 months away from the deceleration burns that will finally slow them down enough to enter their target star system. Just 18 months. If the social order doesn't change before they actually arrive, this landing is inevitably going to devolve into a catastrophic bloodbath between the castes. You can literally feel the tension building. Now, against this massive, oppressive backdrop, we meet a guy named Elias Kane. He's 32, wiry, and has that permanent slouch of a janitor who spent his whole life down in the lower decks. The orphanage officially listed him as a product of spontaneous genetic drift. But Elias has a secret. Down in the abandoned hydroponic annex of Sector 19, which has been totally sealed off since the Great Blight, he's secretly coaxed a small rig back to life. He's growing hidden tomato vines that literally climb up a trellis made of wire and hope. I mean, it turns out the ultimate act of rebellion on a dystopian space station is amateur gardening. But seriously, these tomatoes serve as a really vital thematic metaphor for the entire story. They perfectly represent organic, spontaneous growth thriving in the dark, pushing back against this cold, hyper-artificial system.
Moving into Section 2, the 100% match.
So every 6 months, citizens are forced to undergo a mandatory health review. You know the drill: blood draw, genome scan, purity adjustment. Now, for his entire life, Elias has always scored exactly a 43%. Never a point higher, never a point lower. Just a life of stable, completely invisible mediocrity. So he walks into Medical Bay 4 expecting absolutely nothing but the usual boring routine. But then, out of nowhere, the scanner machine issues this long, rising tone. The screen flickers, and Dr. Soren Vale, who is a strict pureblood, just stares in absolute shock. Elias's DNA is not a 43% match. It is a 100% perfect match to the legendary founder-commander Harlan J. Voss. Not 99.9%, identical. This is the man who supposedly died without an heir over 2 whole centuries ago. In a split second, Elias's entire reality is totally flipped upside down.
They immediately lock Elias in the medbay, but his years working as a janitor mean he knows all the ship's hidden architecture. He slips out through a maintenance crawlspace, breaks into an old archive, and man, he uncovers a massive secret. Turns out, right after that mutiny in year 47, a chief geneticist covertly gestated one single embryo from Commander Voss just to secretly preserve the bloodline. They called this child Subject Omega, hid him down in the lowest castes, and faked his purity markers so the mixed descendant oligarchy wouldn't lose their grip on power. Elias realizes with absolute, terrifying clarity that he is the living, breathing legacy of a 200-year-old political cover-up.
And that brings us to Section 3, Uncovering Subject Omega.
With a council now aggressively hunting him down to protect their power, Elias basically becomes a ghost in the ship's lower decks. He's constantly on the run, sleeping in ventilation shafts. But he quickly discovers he is far from alone. He teams up with Lyra Voss, who, ironically, has absolutely zero relation to the commander. She's this brilliant hydroponics engineer with a 67% purity score and a fierce, fierce hatred for the system. Through Lyra, Elias gets connected with the Drift. Now, this is an already organized underground resistance network made up of black market mechanics, teachers, and even some disillusioned mid-level purebloods. It turns out the spark of revolution didn't even need to be created. It was already there, just waiting for the right catalyst.
And when you dig into the hidden medical data, it reveals exactly what pushed those mid-level purebloods to join the resistance in the first place. The genetic health of the upper decks is steadily, undeniably declining, while the lower decks remain incredibly stable. It just perfectly proves how reducing human beings to a rigid set of numbers creates an absolute dystopia. The Council is actively, knowingly choosing their own political power and feeling of superiority over the actual survival of the human race. It's totally wild.
All right, Section 4, Broadcasting the Truth.
Elias and Lyra know that rumors just aren't going to cut it. They need irrefutable proof. Their target? The ultra-secure vault right under the council chambers. Step 1 of the plan. They forge work orders, using Lyra's credentials and Elias's stolen uniform to subtly slip past the security checkpoints. Step 2. Lyra uses this totally scavenged splicing rig to bypass an absolute monster of biometric locks on the vault door. And finally, Step 3. Elias uses his 100% Voss DNA to access the original Founder archive. Together, they copy the unedited truth, all the medical records, the cover-ups, the centuries of lies, onto 3 separate data crystals. It is a tense, perfectly executed heist operation.
But of course, getting out is way harder than getting in. Elias ends up getting captured just to buy Lyra enough time to escape with the crystals. They throw him into this luxury prison, where he gets a visit from Counselor Amara Voss, a literal 99.8% pureblood. When Elias directly confronts her about the cruelty of the caste system, Amara delivers this completely chilling justification. She says, "Civil war in a tin can is extinction. We did what was necessary." This highlights such a classic narrative theme, right? Authoritarianism almost always masks itself as cold, hard pragmatism. The Council claims they created the Purity Index to preserve order and save humanity, while completely, conveniently ignoring all the massive suffering it caused along the way.
So Amara actually offers Elias a deal. She wants him to become a symbolic figurehead, the returned heir, just to keep the populace calm as they finally land. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates Elias's true character. He completely rejects being used as a political mascot. Instead, he drops this incredibly powerful public rebuke. "The dirt on my hands is the same as the blood in your veins." I mean, what a line. Elias totally rejects the entire premise that DNA dictates a person's worth. He outright refuses to step into the role of a new ruler, demanding instead that the entire corrupt system be dismantled from the ground up. Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, Cultivating a New Future.
The Drift actually succeeds, broadcasting those archive files to every single screen across the Eternal Vigil. And let me tell you, the old hierarchies just absolutely crack under the crushing weight of this truth. Society undergoes this massive, immediate transition. They go from an unelected oligarchy based purely on genetics straight to a new charter featuring an elected council with strict term limits. human identity shifts entirely. It's no longer determined by some random DNA match, but by what an individual actually contributes to society. And science, it pivots away from obsessively preserving the bloodlines of the past, moving toward actually sustaining the diverse health of the entire population for the future. The cage is finally officially broken.
And this really brings us full circle right back to Elias's secret tomatoes. Elias completely refuses any sort of leadership role, choosing instead to officially cultivate his public garden. He and Lyra realize something profound. Humanity doesn't need another commander who's obsessed with purity and absolute control. No, what humanity actually needs to survive on a brand new planet are gardeners. People who are willing to get their hands dirty, to accept imperfection, and to really foster organic, sometimes totally unpredictable growth.
Which leaves us with this final, really important thought. The Eternal Vigil is an absolute masterclass in world building, sure, but it also holds a mirror right up to us. As we travel toward our own uncertain future, measuring our worth and structuring our own societies, the big question remains: will we choose to be commanders, clinging to rigid, artificial pasts, or will we step up and be gardeners, willing to get our hands a little dirty to cultivate a shared tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Focused learners, keep questioning, keep growing, and I'll catch you next time.